Please. As far as I know, the first school that was designed to educate the human mind was born in certain parts of Africa. And it wasn't public, it was private. Next came some schools in Greece, and they weren't public, they were private. Then, around the 3rd or so century after the death of Jesus Christ, if he ever existed, you have all these schools, Christian schools, coming forth. And there was one function that these schools had. Hello, Lena. Good morning. To make sure that people know that they are sinners and their life is going to be filled with struggle and pain and misery, that they can't really do much for themselves except to accept Jesus Christ as their teacher, listen to his teachings, follow his guidance, and hopefully, if they're lucky, they'll find themselves in either hell, if they're unlucky, purgatory, or heaven. The Christians did something really interesting, which was they shut down all schools that encouraged people to think. I have no doubt some of you in this class have had difficult issues in life. I have no doubt that some of you right now sit and you're completely bored because it's the easiest thing to do, to just begin to imagine things, to daydream. It's what we call one of the 7 deadly sins, sloth. Just to give yourself away to emotions and thoughts and let them take you wherever they want to take you. It's very difficult to tame the imagination. It takes a good amount of awareness. After some years, you have schools such as Yale, Harvard, Oxford. They're really, for the most part, religious schools. Until the 19th century, when everything became secularized. And early 20th century, something very strange happened. For the first time in our history, we had a branch called philosophy, another branch called geography, another branch called anthropology, another branch called psychology. Never done before. All of a sudden, you have all these different branches of knowledge. So today, when you ask someone, what are you studying? They say, I'm doing history. But what's the use of doing history without psychology? What's the use of doing philosophy without history? But schools were not public. And let me tell you why schools were not public. I met a friend some years ago. She was a very, very young, attractive woman in Sacramento. She had no mom, she had no dad, she had no siblings, she had no money. The only thing that she really, really had was a beautiful body. That's the only way she could make money. It was free to the public. Not free in the sense that she would just lay with anyone. With a decent amount of money, she would lay with them and then make a relatively decent living. Education has always been private, or was always private, for one simple reason. You know, it's really, really difficult to make money to pay for rent. To get married at the age of 25, 26, by the time you're 30, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. It's difficult to make money to bring home bread. So only a few people could go to school and be educated. The rest of us, we were like mules, we just had to work. If that doesn't make sense, let me give it to you in this way. When you're young, whether you're a man or a woman, when you're 18, you will go out with almost anyone who's relatively attractive. We don't really know how to ask good questions. You don't really know what you're looking for. You just go out with them. And after a few weeks, you realize you've become slowly attached. And then even though you come to realize that there is something seriously wrong with them, like they drink too much, they smoke too much, they use foul language, they come from a broken background, it's too late for that now. You like them. God forbid you love them. And now you're going to spend the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years trying to fix them. And then when you're 30, 40, you realize they're a lost cause. But you spent 30 of your good years to waste. Well, when you get to be 30, 40 with a good amount of experience and wisdom behind you, when you go out on date, you have become a private candidate in the sense that you have specific questions. You want to know if you're giving your time to someone who deserves you. Your body, your energy, your history, your future. Why was school private for the longest time in our human history? Most people were not qualified to go to school. So school always remained baptized. No one came to the halls of education with trash. Buildings such as this did not have space for anger, for emotions inside people that were chaotic, for emotions that couldn't be contained. So when the instructor walked in, the students knew what they were going to receive. Today, the story is very different. You have Abel, who's 81. You have Stan, who is 40. You have Zoni, who is 35. You have Zayan, who is 18. Look around this room and you will see, if you're somewhat perceptive, that there are things inside people. They may be quiet, they may be somewhat dignified on the outside. Just look at them. And you will realize that people have some issues. No one went to school to get a grade. People went to school to be educated, to understand. And it was a painful process. So, let me tell you what the word education means. Any of you in this class have ever been to therapy? Almost all of you. Now, yeah, I went to therapy. Good. So let me tell you how therapy works. Whether you got crummy parents, and we'll talk about parents in a few days or weeks, or maybe you had a crummy life experience, or maybe you were just born with a bad skin color in a bad place. Whatever the issues were, You kept them hidden. You didn't speak about them. You tried not to think about them. You tried not to expose yourself to anyone. Why? You knew that people have the power to hurt you, betray you, backstab you. And even if you try to talk about your issues, you realize that your emotions are far too big, far too intense, far too pregnant, and they couldn't fit language. So you mumbled a few times, you became frustrated, then eventually you realize it's best to remain mute on those particular issues. And you thought like an ostrich. For those of you who don't know this particular bird, it's a huge bird. Whenever an ostrich sees a lion or a fox or a hyena, you know what it does? It digs a hole in the ground, puts her head into the hole, and she or he wrongly assumes that just because it is dark and she can't see anything, the lion can't see them either. 10 minutes later, you know what happens? They're devoured. They're eaten alive. So you and I wrongly assume that just because you say nothing about your issues to anyone, including yourself, that eventually they'll go away. And then you get into a relationship. Or then you have friends, and your friends keep telling you, what the hell is wrong with you? Why do you get angry so quickly? You say, oh, it's nothing. It's just the way I was born. Okay, so you hear this from person number 1, and then number 2, and then number 3. And then you realize you're getting older and older and older and uglier and smellier, and people like you less. And then one day you wake up and you say, I hate myself. And you assume that just because you don't like yourself, you need a therapy, and your therapist can put you back together. The only thing you've come to realize is you just don't like yourself. But in the past 30 or 40 or 50 years, the best thing that you have done, that you're really good at, was to run away from your problems. Now you go to the therapist. You give them $100 an hour, week after week. You're not going to say anything to them just yet. You know why? Because in the course of running away, you have lost something profoundly important. Trust, faith, honesty, transparency. You have lost all of them. So you're going to spend the next few years just gaining, trusting your therapist. Then, if your therapist is any good, they're going to start educating you. Which means what? They're going to look at the trigger points. Metaphorically speaking, they're going to put their thumb right here. Okay? They're going to say, what's your name? You're going to say, well, my name is Joe Schmo. But your pulse remains the same. It's okay. Who's your daddy? And all of a sudden, something about you speeds up. That's one trigger. How's your mom? It speeds up even more. How's your boyfriend? And all of a sudden, the therapist comes to realize that, man, if he or she continues with these lines of questions, your heart is going to explode. And then they're going to sit you down and say, okay, tell me about your dad. It's the first time in 10, 15, 20 years that now you're going to talk about your father. But here's the problem. Because you haven't had good practice, we don't know where to start. And when you do start, emotions are going to come up. And these are emotions that you've never had before. And if you have, you don't know how to deal with them. And the poor therapist has to sit back while you throw fit, anger here, weeping there, screaming there. Then after 5, 6, 7 months, you have done enough crying and enough screaming where you can sit and actually begin to talk about your history. And as you talk about your history, your therapist will say, well, did you hear just what you said? Did you catch that? Did you hear this? And little by little, you begin to see things. But seeing things is not enough, because when you begin to see things, you're going to feel things. And you won't like what you see or what you feel. The word education is Latin. It means to bring out. Do you have any questions so far? What was your name?
Dave.
Dave.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me just make sure that I mark you here. Dave, what's your last name? R? Okay, you're good. Thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
What's the point?
Point to what? What is the point? In this class or in general?
About this conversation. Talk about therapists, struggles, the foundation.
That's a really, really good question. What's the point? There are a couple of ways one can respond to this question. A few years ago, when the Super Bowl was taking place on TV, Pepsi Cola decided to do an experiment. They wanted to see how the human mind works. So they said, let's advertise the logo Pepsi on this humongous billboard for no more than a second. Just see what happens. And they did. The sale of Pepsi Cola went up almost 1,000%. Now, I have no doubt that halftime is about 30 minutes or 40 minutes. People get in their cars, they drive to 7-Eleven or Safeway or Costco, they grab themselves some drinks, and they come back home. All assuming that it's really their desire. They want Pepsi. That they haven't been deceived into buying Pepsi. They weren't pushed or been made into becoming a customer. What am I saying? See, I'm advertising some things, no? Now, there are a couple of things. You either have issues, and what I'm talking about will trigger some thoughts inside you, or you have no issues. And I will create issues. See, I don't know, maybe you have a companion, and maybe you guys are really, really good. You guys go out, watch some movies, go out for dinner, go to coffee, you hold hands while walking around the lake. You guys don't ask difficult questions, and you shouldn't. You go with your parents, all that stuff. You come to this class. And I say, Dave, so tell me about love. Or tell me about relationships. And you say, I don't know, I'm having a great one. Really? Well, what does it mean to be in a relationship? What sort of an image are you showing to your companion? Is it really you? You're only 18. You know people change all the time. Who are you? What are you? Are you sure she loves you? Do you know what love is? Does she know what love is? And let's say you say, well, you know, my parents are Hispanic, let's just say. But I was born here. Do you know much about your culture? You know, it's about 3,000, 4,000 years. Are you fully American, half American? What kind of a person are you? And then you take those questions to your companion. Now, you haven't had any issues for the past 2 years. Now you look at her, you say, so, Joanna, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know, you're nice. The hell is that? Now you got issues. Issues by themselves are not a problem. I mean, if you're a human being, man, you suck. Because almost everything you touch, as the 13th century poet Dante would say, everything you touch will eventually turn into dust. Everything. The question is, how do you want to deal with the issues that you got? We've talked about this plenty of times. You know, Muhammad Ali had a fight with George Foreman in 1978. Do you like boxing? You're a man, you need to. Now, all bets were on George Foreman, that he's going to just knock the crap out of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali is older, is much more tired. George Foreman is a young guy, he's powerful. Round 8 comes about. Muhammad Ali just allowed George Foreman to beat him up to the point where he just gets exhausted. Then with a couple of punches, Ali knocks Foreman to the canvas and Foreman can't get up. Then it's taking place in Zaire. And then Muhammad Ali is walking around and these young kids are just cheering him. And then at one point, Ali, as he's walking the streets with all these kids who are really poor, they have nothing. And he looks at the houses, they're all like cardboard boxes and tin cans and all that stuff. He looks at them and says, I don't understand you people. You are so poor. You have nothing. No running water, no electricity, you have nothing. And yet you have dignity. How is it that people who have nothing can have so much self-respect? He says, we have poverty in America, man. We have things, but we also have poverty. But our poverty has no self-respect. There is no dignity. There is violence. There is crime. So the thing you need to ask yourself is this. Why is it that a place like Mexico, a place like India, a place like Afghanistan, where people have nothing, can live life with so much self-respect and dignity, and a place like America, a land of abundance, privilege, every single day you have mass shootings? Why? You can't even walk around the lake anymore without getting mugged. See, you didn't come to this class without these issues. Yes.
I'm going to say it out loud. I'm a little older. I'm taking offense.
Yes.
I apologize.
That's okay.
You, but some of the things waiting, maybe it's for a response or reaction, but they can wait. They're not uniform here. They're not uniform.
You're absolutely right.
So that's just my personal.
Sure.
Opinion. Nobody else.
Sure. Yes.
And just because, and I'm going to say this, in this particular personal climate, just because you are gender male, likewise females, very fluid time, things are.
I understand.
So I'm just saying that out
Sure.
and everybody know and I really don't care. I am a Christian.
Sure.
I took offense to what you said. Whether you believe that. You don't have to believe. That's up to you.
Okay.
And anybody else in that particular doctrine.
Good.
Anything else in whatever doctrine they may have.
Okay.
But as an older heterosexual male, I define myself. Still a Christian.
Okay.
I'm still an earthling. I live on Earth. How they continental, geographical divide and stuff like that. That's just the way the Earth is designed. And it's flux. It's been in flux for centuries. It will be in flux probably for more centuries.
You are absolutely right.
It's conversation.
You're absolutely right about everything that you said. This is only the third day of this class. It's good to have points. so that we could conversate about, almost everything under the sun that involves human beings are complicated things. It's good for you that you're a Christian, but you should know that if I remember correctly, Jesus had 12 disciples. None of them understood him. Eventually, he walked to his death alone. And here's the thing that you and I need to ask ourselves. How is it that if you're a disciple of Christ, that you walk with him, talk with him, break bread with him, you have difficulty understanding him? Yet, 2,000 years pass by, and the assumption that you and I have is that we can understand him. How is that possible?
Not mine.
Okay, now,
Two things I can do. One, I can speak for myself. Second, I can pray for myself. Faith-based relationships, in my mind, what they are. They are just faith. I don't believe anything that I wasn't there. About a history, I wasn't there. They are faith-based. Well, I believe that all these particular things based on whatever are faith-based. They are, including education, self-faith. You take that on faith. Basically. Except for math.
okay,
Everything else basically is.
okay.
So I'm not saying that he was or wasn't. I'm not saying that he is or isn't. I'm saying that for me, I can
Sure.
relate it.
That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Yes?
Oh, you said something about imagination, and I've been thinking about it. So are you saying, like, adults, when they become more self-aware, they don't have as much imagination, and that's why kids, like, would you label kids as not self-aware, and that's why they have more imagination? I just wanted you to elaborate on that, because
Okay.
you think adults, like, they lose their imagination when they gain more self-awareness.
There are a couple of things. How old are you?
24,
Okay. You finished high school at what age?
18.
Did your parents tell you to stay in school?
Yeah,
And you did?
yeah.
The opposite?
I did for a little bit,
And then?
and then I stopped, and
Because?
then I did it again. Because that's not what I wanted to do.
Good. So you imagine that you can survive without education. You thought that your life is going to be relatively creative. You had, as our friend would say, faith in yourself. That if you didn't do, say, what your parents were asking you, your life will end up at a certain point that you can actually be sufficient and enjoy your life. Time passes, your imagination gets tested by time, by realities of life. And all of a sudden, something really interesting happens to you. You become more reflective, more rational. You know what imagination happens to? What time does to your imagination? You know when you're like dozing off, someone comes over and slaps you and you wake up? Time slaps you. And you realize, man, you were 18. You thought you were going to be a musician. You thought you were going to do this and that, right? You do a few albums, you do a few YouTubes, you do a few TikToks, and you realize you have no viewers. No one really likes you. And then you're getting older, uglier, smellier. You say, maybe I should put myself back to school. Why? We have no choice but to conform. Why do we conform? You conform because there are signs out there. You want to go to Safeway? Google it. And what does Google do for you? It removes your imagination, gives you directions. And if you follow it well, you'll get to Safeway. You don't just say, I believe in my imagination. I have faith in it. You can. But you'll spend the next 2 weeks running around looking for Safeway. And then you may starve. See, for 1,000 years, what was your name again?
Mine's Amber.
Amber. You know, for 1,000 years, human beings lived on one bread. It's called faith. 18th century came about and something strange happened. Forget 18th century. Early 20th century. Do you guys understand the impact of World War I? For all these years, you and I have been told that deep inside you lives the kingdom of God. That human beings are decent, noble. That there is compassion, forgiveness. Go online and check out World War I. It only took a few years. Then World War II happened. You have no idea what happens when life crucifies you. How it'll test your faith, your dignity, your intelligence, your so-called wisdom. If you want to know a human being, put him or her under pressure. World Wars I and II put the human psyche on pressure. And you know what we discovered? There is really nothing good about us. Now, for those of you in this class who enjoy democracy, all these options, ask yourself, what happens when you go to a buffet to eat food versus going to In-N-Out? You see, when you go to In-N-Out, you have three options. Number 1, number 2, or number 3. A hamburger, a cheeseburger, or a double. Fries and a medium Coke. In and out. 5 minutes. Now go to a buffet. First, you got to pay $20. Then there are 50 dishes out there. Which one do you choose? What do you eat? I assure you, most of you who go to buffets will end up with a diarrhea. Why? Because the human psyche is not designed for too many options. We get confused. It's too much. Add to it. How much time do you really think you and I got in life? Do you really think you can go out there and experience all the options out there for you? I have no doubt for those of us in this class who have some age on us, sometimes you sit back and you say, damn, I am 40. I should have been done with this goddamn thing called school many, many decades ago. What took me so long? I have no doubt some of you have been in decent, unfortunately bad relationships. It took you 10 years to get out. And you say, God damn it, I spent 10 of my good years. Why? Why is it that we have regret? It's not a bad thing to have faith in love. Not a bad thing to have faith in human decency. Nothing bad about those things at all. But life is immensely complicated, and imagination doesn't go very far.